Good morning. On behalf of the Topics of the 60s class and the Social Studies Department, we are very excited to present to you today Mr. Mike Solterbeck. Mr. Solterbeck? No heckling, Mr. Carr. Mr. Solterbeck taught here at Beaver Local for 35 years. Amazing, amazing government teacher, history teacher, Topics of the 60s teacher, and it actually, the Topics class was his baby. He's the one that designed it, and I'm not doing a great job, but I try. So he has so much knowledge about the assassination of President John Kennedy from 1963, and he's going to share with you today about this, the assassination, and I hope you all welcome him. I would like to ask you at this time, please make sure that your devices are all silenced, that nothing is going off, and please also make sure that you are not on your phones. One of the teachers will come and take them. This is an important event, and we're very excited that he's willing to come and talk to us today, so we want to be very appreciative and attentive. Thank you very much, and let's welcome Mr. Mike Solterbeck.
All right, thank you. Like Mrs. Moultrie said, I created the Topics of the 60s class way back, and it came out of a whim at the old building. I started over there and I left with the old building. So I never was in this building. I retired before that. I created that class because I was interested about what happened to President Kennedy, believe it or not. I thought, well, whatever happened to him as far as why he was assassinated, it has to be more than just that day when he was killed. It has to be what led up to it. I know Mrs. Moultrie's talked to you guys about different things like the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Bay of Pigs invasion, all these things that were happening in the world at the time, the Cold War with the Soviet Union. And I created that class out of the concept because I was always interested in who killed President Kennedy. And to this day, we still don't know. We don't know if it was what the government has said, that Lee Harvey Oswald shot and killed John Kennedy all by himself. Nobody else was involved. Well, then why for the past 60 years, that's how long it's been, this November it'll be 60 years that he was assassinated. Why was there so many documents, some are being released now, that were kept secret for all these years? You know, if Lee Harvey Oswald did it by himself, why are the documents sealed? Why weren't they released years and years ago? Now, the ones that have come out recently, the documents that the National Archives, the government's releasing, a lot of the things that are coming out, first of all, you're not going to find a smoking gun. You're not going to have a document come out and say, this guy shot him, and this guy shot him, and this is what happened. No. That stuff will never come out, okay? The things that have come out, though, is what people like myself have been saying for the past 60 years. It's proving the theories that we put forth actually could have happened. So, I made this slide presentation, believe it or not. I used to have an old slide projector with a carousel on top that none of you guys know what is, and I'd flash pictures up here. I made this when I was a junior in college in 1979. Never thinking that when I was making those for a class back in the day that I would still be using them here in 2023. Never even occurred to me. So let me take you through this assassination, and then there's a lot of little things I'll be adding into it, the mysteries and things that are still going on. First of all, John Kennedy went to Texas, I should say. He went to San Antonio, he went to Houston, and he stayed the first night he was in Texas at Fort Worth in a hotel. That morning, when he got up, there were tons of people outside the hotel wanting to see him. So he came down and spoke to them in the parking lot of the hotel. This is November 22nd, the morning. He has about 3.5 hours to live right here. This is his vice president, Lyndon Johnson, who was from Texas. This is the governor of Texas, John Connally. He'll be the other man that is shot when Kennedy is shot. Those two are the only ones. This is the motorcade route that they're going to take through Fort Worth, Texas, where he spent the night, to the airplane. And you can see that Mrs. Kennedy, if I can get this thing to work right, Mrs. Kennedy, the president, the governor of Texas, and the governor's wife, they're on their way to the airfield in Fort Worth to fly to Dallas this morning. Okay? Kennedy went to Texas because it's an election year coming up in 1964. This is 1963. So he's campaigning for re-election. Also, it's a fundraiser for the Democratic Party. And the Democrats had been infighting between themselves. They were arguing, this senator was arguing with this, and he knew that he had to bring Texas together, the party, in order to win re-election in 1964. It took about 15 minutes to fly from Fort Worth to Dallas. It's not far. It's not far. This is the president and Mrs. Kennedy landing at a place called Love Field. That's the name of the airport in Dallas. It's still there. He lands here. He immediately gets off the plane, sees thousands and thousands of people welcoming him there. Back in Washington, before he left for this trip, many people were telling him not to go, that he was going to nut country, that his life might not be safe there. He'd already had a motorcade canceled in Chicago because of the threats against his life. And then a couple weeks later, he was in Tampa, Florida. They were ready to cancel the motorcade because of threats on his life. But he said, no, I'm going to go through with it. I can't hide. I'm the American people's president, and they need to see me. That morning, it was raining. As soon as Kennedy touched down in Dallas, the sun came out. And when the sun came out, the president told Secret Service men, I don't want to have the bubble top put on the car. I want the people to be able to see me and Mrs. Kennedy. So that is why the roof, it wasn't bulletproof anyways. The plastic bubble top on the presidential limousine was taken off. Here are pictures at the airport. You can see back then how close people could get to the president. There's just like a snow fence between the crowd and the president coming through the airport at Love Field. This is them getting in the presidential limousine, how they will be sitting when they go through the streets of Dallas. The motorcade is going to last probably 40 minutes or so. The president's on his way to give a speech at a luncheon where people paid $100 a plate to come listen to him speak to raise money for the Democratic Party. This is the area that's known as Dealey Plaza. This is where the assassination will happen. Now, there are some places here I've got to point out to you. This place right here, this is known as the grassy knoll. Okay? This is a grass slope that goes down to the street here. This is a monument, memorial, little park-like area where people would come and eat their lunch and things that worked in downtown Dallas. Back here, behind the grassy knoll, there's a wooden picket fence that runs all along here, and you'll get to see this later. And then behind here, there's a railroad tower where a man who worked for the railroad company was up in his towers, and I will tell you in a little bit what he saw. This is a better view of Dealey Plaza. You can see, I got on here the white line. The president's limousine will come down this street right here. This is Main Street in Dallas. Okay? The airport, Love Field, is all the way over here. And he'll come and he'll be going through side streets and everything, coming down, and eventually he'll hit Main Street and come through here. Once he gets here, he's going to take a sharp right turn to end up here on Elm Street, or Houston Street. Why is this not working? Oh, there we go. The car will come down here and turn right onto Elm Street, or Houston Street. Then there'll be a sharp, real sharp left turn right here, where he'll come down Elm Street, and right here is where he'll be assassinated. This is the famous Texas School Book Depository. This is where two government investigations into the assassination say Lee Harvey Oswald was right there in that corner window right there. And that's where he shot 3 times at the president and killed him. This is the presidential limousine coming down Main Street, getting ready to turn onto Houston. You can see the motorcycle escorts. Here you can see the backup car behind the president's limousine. The president's limousine right here. And then behind him is another car with Secret Service agents on the side. Okay? This man right here, his name's Clint Hill. He's still alive. He's written books about that day. And he's the only one that will react when the shooting starts. Here they are getting ready to turn onto Houston Street. President's limousine has now made that turn. Mrs. Kennedy had sunglasses on, and the president told her, "Take those off, take those off. I want people to see your face. I want them to see you." And right here, again, they're turning onto Houston Street. This is the governor. Notice the position between the Governor Conley of Texas and the president here. Okay? This will come into play here in a few minutes. Okay? I want you to see the distance. There's only about 3 feet. Right here is where Mrs. Connolly, right here, said to the president, you can see him looking at her, said to the president, "Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you." And his last words he ever spoke in his life was something like, "Yeah, you're right." Or, "Yeah, you can say that," something like that. Right here he has about a minute and a half to live. Again, now, up in that corner window, this is where Lee Harvey Oswald, this is where Oswald has boxes. This building was a book warehouse, and they shipped textbooks all across Texas to the different schools. And he made a sniper's nest up there where he put these boxes in front of the window so that he would be hidden. If anybody came up, they wouldn't see him sitting in front of that window. Here's a better picture of where the sniper's nest is. Down below are 3 people that worked on the 5th floor that are there right below Oswald, and they will testify that they heard gunshots right above them and that they heard shell casings, empty shell casings hitting the wooden floor above. This is in front of the book depository. This is taken from a home movie. There were many people that had cameras and home movie projectors. This was before cell phones and video cameras and all that stuff, guys. It was just regular film back in the day. Mrs. Kennedy right here, the president, the governor, and his wife. Okay, here's where I got to stop and point out some things. This right here is the grassy knoll. This back here is the picket fence. There's a man standing right here. His name is Abraham Zapruder. His secretary is balancing him because he has got his eyes closed as he looks into his home movie camera and is filming the president coming down the street. This man right here is known as the Umbrella Man. It's bright, sunshiny day in Dallas, Texas, not a cloud in the sky, and this is the only man that has an umbrella open. This man right here, you will see these two here in a few minutes. This man here is standing, he will raise his fist at Kennedy. Now, people have said that this guy here was the signal guy for the shooting to begin. That he was, when Kennedy got right near, this was the kill zone, the shot area. This is where the man with the umbrella opened his umbrella up, like so that people who were the shooters or shooter could see and know that Kennedy was right in their target. All right? You can see the man here with his fist raised now at Kennedy. Here's the umbrella guy. Zapruder is up here. These two people here are Bill and Gail Newman. They had their little kids here to watch the president, to see the motorcade come by. And they will react and hit the deck. One of the last pictures before the president is shot. Now, the first shot that was fired did not hit anything. It deflected off a tree branch, went across the street, and hit the curb and shattered the curb. And a man standing on the opposite side of the street felt something stinging, and when he felt his cheek, it was bleeding. And here, the first shot, what the official story is, missed, it hit a tree branch, deflected, and it would cause the wound that James took. The second shot that was fired, the first shot, Kennedy and everybody were like, what is that? Lots of people thought it was motorcycle backfire, because these old Harleys would backfire all the time, and there were 20 Harley-Davidson motorcycles in the motorcade. Right in this picture here, this is Mrs. Kennedy's hand grabbing the president's arm because the president is reacting to being shot. He's grabbing his throat. According to the official story, the first shot that hit the president hit him in the back, exited his throat, and then went down into Governor Connolly, that you can see here, how Governor Connolly is kind of leaning left and hunched down. Here's the motorcyclist and the Clint Hill, the Secret Service agent that I said was the only one that reacts. These two motorcyclists, when Kennedy is shot in the head and killed, they will be splattered with blood and brain tissue. And notice where they're at. Kennedy is over here. They're over on this side, the opposite side of the president. Back here, this is Lyndon Johnson, the vice president, in his car with his wife, and Lyndon's right over here. And notice back here, this is the follow-up Secret Service car. These guys are reacting to shots. Agents will come running out with guns. They heard gunfire, and they'll be coming out. Okay? I don't have the Zapruder film. It's 26 seconds long. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Just Google it, it'll come up. I tried to download it last night, it wouldn't go, I couldn't get it to come on my flash drive. But this is a frame of the Zapruder film. You can see the umbrella. As Kennedy emerges from behind this sign, you can see his hands are starting to go up to his throat. The governor, who testified and said, I heard a shot come behind me, is turning now to check on the president. When he turns to check on the president, he doesn't see him and doesn't think, so the governor is starting to turn back the other way, to turn and look in the back seat to see what's going on. You can now see Kennedy is definitely reacting to being hit by a bullet. Mrs. Kennedy is looking over like, what's going on? The governor in his hand, his right hand, has a cowboy hat, a Stetson cowboy hat. He's holding it on his chest like this. Watch what happens. Now you can see the governor is reacting to being shot. His cheek is puffed. His right shoulder is driven downwards towards the door. He's dropped the Stetson hat. Kennedy is definitely reacting to being shot. These are just sketches showing you what I just explained. Now, this is the official theory. The first bullet, remember, missed everything. Deflected off the tree branch. The second bullet hit Kennedy in the back and then exited his throat and then continued on into Governor Conley. Continued on. When it went through Governor Conley, it went in his back, right below his shoulder, went in his back, smashed his fifth and sixth rib right here, rib bone, came out, went in his wrist, and then came through his wrist and embedded in his left thigh. Now, this is supposedly what the second shot did, caused all the wounds to the president and the governor. This is the bullet that did it all. Now, when you look at that, you can see that the nose of the bullet is not flat. It has definitely been fired from a gun. But to cause all the damage that this bullet supposedly did, it came out in pretty much pristine condition. And that's been one of the big arguments forever. The bullet on the left, this is the bullet that Oswald supposedly fired that did all the damage to the president and the governor. This bullet here is the same ammunition that Oswald used. But this was just fired through a dead carcass, I think a sheep or a goat or something, fired through a bone. And you can see how the nose of the bullet is all flattened, and it just hit one bone. Where this bullet hit two ribs, hit a wrist bone, and then came out looking like this. Been big theories on this. Guys, if I was to sit here and tell you this whole thing, we would be here till 7 o'clock tonight. Because there's so much I'm skipping. I'm just giving you, I know I'm on a time schedule here, but there's so many tests that have been done on these bullets, it's just unbelievable, the results. This is right after Kennedy's been hit in the throat, the governor's been hit, okay? Across the street on the side where the president is, this is Bill and Gail Newman. There's their two boys. The president has already been hit. Mrs. Kennedy is reacting. This is inside the limousine from the Zapruder film. This is right before the fatal shot that kills the president. This is from the other side of the street. This picture was taken by another photographer over on this side to show you that the president here is slumped over towards Mrs. Kennedy. These two women here, this is Jean Hill. She was a school teacher. She came down to watch the motorcade. This is Mary Mormon, who right when Kennedy is shot in the head will snap a picture. And she will capture all up here on the grassy knoll in the background and the picket fence and where people think a second shooter was. This is the headshot. This is when the president, the bullet entered the back, according to the official report, entered the back of his head and exploded the right side. I mean, people were hit with brain, tissue, and skull. There will be pieces of the president's skull found. This is a drawing of supposedly what the damage that was done. This is Clint Hill, the Secret Service agent, who's reacting. He comes running off the side bumper there of the car, and he's going to run up to the president's car. He's climbing on the back now. Mrs. Kennedy is out on the trunk. She does not remember doing any of this, by the way. They asked her, do you remember going out on the back? What were you doing, trying to leave the car? And she said, I wasn't leaving anything. Well, what she had, or what she got, was a piece of the president's skull was on the back of the car. And she was retrieving it. And she'll have it in her hand and take it to the hospital. They're now speeding off to the hospital. The hospital in Dallas is called Parkland Memorial. And that's Clint Hill, the agent in the back. The president has been pulled down into the car. And it's at this time that Clint Hill can see the big wound in the president's head. He's just shaking his head knowing there's no hope. This is the president's car leaving. This is the area of Dealey Plaza where he was shot, on their way to the hospital here. Now there's a retired railroad worker up here that you'll see in a little bit. His name's Sam Holland. And I'll tell you his story here in a minute. Car speeding away towards the hospital under the railroad overpass. Now right after the shooting, people didn't know, I mean, it was just, the whole thing happened, guys, in 8 seconds. From the first shot to the last shot that hit Kennedy in the head was 8 seconds. And people didn't know what just happened. Now, here is the better, you can see this picket fence here. This is where they say, right here, is where there was another shooting. Right there. Here's Gene Hill and Mary Mormon. Everybody's starting to run. You can see a policeman thinks shots came from up here on the railroad overpass. He's up here. 2 of the police officers had to park their motorcycles because their windshields were splattered with so much blood they couldn't see. And this is on the opposite side where Kennedy was sitting. So if a shot comes from behind and hits him in the back of the head, your natural tendency would be to drive your head forward and downward. Well, when you guys get a chance to see the Zapruder film, you'll see that when the fatal headshot hits, he's not driven down and backwards because something happened. Because Oswald is behind him. When Kennedy is hit, his head is driven backwards and to the left. Here is the 2, Gail and Bill Newman that I told you about. Bill Newman told his wife to get down. He thought the shots were coming from right here, the grassy knoll area. He thought this is where the shots were coming from, and they were in a direct line of fire. They were standing right beside the president's car when he was hit in the head. So he gets his wife and they cover their kids up, and they'll testify that they thought the shots came from over here. This is after, here's the press cars and everything, that people are just like dumbfounded. They don't even know what happened. They didn't see this because they were so far back in the motorcade. Notice this policeman's got his gun out. These motorcyclists are taking off to catch the president's limousine to get to the hospital. Notice these 2 guys right here. Look, everybody else is like, what's going on? What's going on? They're reacting. And these 2 guys are sitting there on the curb like they knew something was going to happen. That's the guy with the umbrella and the guy that raised his fist. This is just another picture. Here's the motorcycles you can see where the guy had to stop because he couldn't see because of the blood on his windshield. This is the press bus that comes. This is the end of the motorcade route, or end of the motorcade, I should say. Okay, now, a man named Sam Holland, who was a retired railroad worker, was standing right here. This is where he was standing on that railroad overpass. The president's car is coming right down here. Here's where Bill and Gail Newman were standing, right here when the president shot in the head and thought shots were coming behind him. This is not Sam Holland, but this is. Sam Holland, after he heard the last shot, he said, I saw puffs of smoke come from behind this wooden fence over here on the grassy knoll. So he went over and he stood behind the fence where he thought the shots came from, where he saw the puff of smoke. And this is what it looks like behind here. Now, take a good look at this, guys. If you were an assassin and you had a rifle, you could put that rifle barrel right into those two pickets to steady it. You'd have the perfect shot at the president down here. Okay? This is where Sam Holland's standing, right here. This is the shot that would have hit Kennedy in the head from the right front. Right there. This is where Sam Holland was standing, and if you look here, you can see how he would have been protected if there was another gunman. I got my own theories. But if there was a gunman there, you can see where the president was wide open and would have had a perfect camouflage that the guy wouldn't have been seen. Now, right after the assassination, after the president's hit in the head, people ran up to the police and said, "Get up there, get up there. We saw somebody, we saw people back there, behind that fence up there. Go up there." So they started running up there. The first policeman to get up there got up there 90 seconds after Kennedy had been hit in the head. His name was Officer Joe Smith. He got up there, had his gun drawn, his pistol, and he starts behind that picket fence. And as soon as he gets up there, there's a man standing there. And he's got a suit jacket on, and he's dirty. And the police officer says, "Stop, who are you?" He says, "I'm Secret Service." He says, "You have any identification that you're Secret Service?" He says, "Oh yeah, look." And he reaches in his coat pocket, he pulls out this Secret Service badge. So, Officer Smith let him go. Starts looking at the parked cars back here, starts looking behind the fence, see if there's anybody else there. He finds muddy footprints behind the fence, right where Sam Holland was standing. Remember, it rained that morning, but it wasn't raining with motor. And he also found cigarette butts, like fresh cigarettes had been smoked. And then on one of the parked cars he checked, the bumper on the back of one of the cars had two muddy footprints on it, like somebody had stood on the bumper with muddy feet on that car. Well, they didn't check the trunks or anything. This is a theory, and some people believe that the second shooter got away. This is how he got away. If there was a second shooter on the grassy knoll, this is how he got away. There were parked cars there. The one guy that said he was a Secret Service agent, okay, was his helper. And when that guy shot and killed the president, hit him in the head, he climbed up, got in the trunk of one of those parked cars. They shut the lid, and he was encountered by the police officer, the other guy, and he let him get away. Later, somebody came back and drove that car away with somebody in the trunk. That's a theory. Okay? That's a theory. When Officer Joe Smith went down to police headquarters and said his story, what he encountered, they wanted to know, well, what'd you do after the president was shot? What'd you do? He said, I ran up that grassy slope there, went behind the pit, I encountered a Secret Service agent. And so his superiors said, well, we'll call the Secret Service Department and find out, well, who was that agent that you had stationed behind the picket fence there when the motorcade was coming through Dealey Plaza? And the Secret Service agents, or Secret Service, told the Dallas police, we don't have no agents on the ground. They're all in the motorcade. So here's a man 90 seconds after Kennedy is killed with a Secret Service badge, evidently fake, standing behind the picket fence. Don't make sense. This is the sniper's nest. This is in the book depository building where Lee Harvey Oswald had his boxes set up here and sat on another box and waited for the president to come down the street here and turn on the Elm and then shoot. This is an FBI recreation of what happened. There's the shot Oswald would have had from the 6th floor window. I'm no hunter or anything. Some of you guys are, with a scope. It's only about 200 yards is all it is. From the sniper's nest down to where Kennedy was shot in the head is about 200 yards. This is from the sniper's nest where Oswald would have shot, right down at Kennedy. Here's the boxes piled up so that if anybody came up, they wouldn't be able to see. Oswald's on the other side of the boxes here, behind this wall with his rifle sticking out. People saw the rifle sticking out. There were people down on the street that actually saw a rifle sticking out of that corner window. Now, here's how lucky Kennedy was that day. Okay? He arrives at Love Field at 11:20, 20 minutes to noon. He's supposed to be giving a speech at noon. He got this big motorcade to ride through yet. Okay? Now here's how this is how things you never think are going to happen. So here's Kennedy riding in an open limousine through the streets of Dallas. He's running late. At noon, Kennedy's not near Dealey Plaza yet. He's far away. But at noon is when the workers in the book depository break and have their lunch. Oswald worked on this 6th floor here in the building, and he had 4 other co-workers with him. And all of them were going to go down. They're all talking about, hey, the president's going to come by any minute. Any minute we're going to get to see the president. They went down to the 2nd floor lunchroom to get their lunches, and they all said they were going to go back up to the 6th floor and eat their lunches and look out the windows here and watch the president come by. Well, Oswald, who's up there, his workers say, come on, Lee, aren't you coming with us? And he says, I'll be down in a minute. I gotta finish packing these boxes here. So Lee Harvey Oswald stays on the floor by himself while the other workers go down to get their lunches. And here's the other twist of fate. They don't come back up to the 6th floor, they come up to the 5th floor, the floor below. Remember that picture I showed you a while ago where they're looking out that corner window and Oswald was right above them, supposedly, with his gun out the window? At this time, Oswald, when his co-workers leave to get their lunches, Oswald builds the sniper's nest. He puts the boxes up, the box he's going to sit on behind the wall. These are the 3 empty shell casings you can only see. Well, you can't see them. There's 1, 2, 3. These, they say Oswald shot 3 times. 3 times he shot. And like I told you, first one missed, second one hit Kennedy in the back of the throat, came out, hit the governor, the third shot hit Kennedy. When these are the shells that are being, the gun that Oswald used was a World War II Italian Manlichter Carcano. It's a bolt-action rifle where you fire and then you got to eject the empty shell casing and then another shell loads up in and you punch down and shoot. Okay?
Okay.
This is an FBI agent recreating what Oswald did after the shooting. Now, my point is, number one, none of his co-workers came back up to the 6th floor to watch. If they would have, they probably would have seen or heard Oswald on that floor and would have maybe stopped the assassination from ever happening. Plus, Kennedy's running late in the motorcade. He's not going to come past this building until 12:30. That's when the first shot rings out. How lucky was Kennedy to happen to come past the building when it was lunchtime and nobody was up there on the floor and Oswald had time to put his rifle together that he brought to work that day and get set up and get ready to shoot at the president. I mean, it's just, if Kennedy would have been a little earlier or much later, somebody might have stopped Oswald. Oswald walks across the 6th floor, hides the gun between cartons of boxes, walks down 4 sets of stairs. Here's the gun where he hid it right here between these cartons. That's the gun. Oswald is on the 2nd floor in the lunchroom getting a bottle of Coke when a policeman, Marion Baker, comes. People said, I saw a gun in that 6th floor window. I saw a gun sticking out of that building. Go. So right after the shooting, a Dallas police officer runs up the front steps of the book depository, and when you walk into the book depository, the first thing you come to is the 2nd floor, and there's the lunchroom. And the first thing he sees Oswald standing there getting a Coke. Now this is 90 seconds after Kennedy's killed. 90 seconds. Officer Baker pulls his gun and says, hey. All of a sudden, the superintendent of the building, the boss, comes over, and he says, what's the matter, officer? What's the matter? He says, who's this man? Who is this guy? He says, oh, don't worry about him. That's Lee Oswald. He works here. So they let him go. Oswald swears the whole time when he's in custody that he was in the 2nd floor lunchroom when Kennedy was shot, that he never saw the shooting. Oswald will then walk out the front doors of the book depository here. Here's where Kennedy was killed. And go down Elm Street here. He gets down here, and by this time the traffic police have all this area closed off down here. Okay? They got all this shut down because the president's just been shot at. They don't know he's dead yet, but they got all this area closed off. Oswald gets in a taxi cab, and he starts to ride a taxi cab, and it gets to about right there, and the traffic is stopped, so Oswald gets out. He walks across Lamar Street here, and there he gets another taxi that takes him home to where he lives. He rents an apartment out here in the area of Dallas known as Oak Cliff. It'd be like Calcutta in East Liverpool. A few miles out the road. This is where Oswald had a 1-room bedroom where he rented. He was separated from his wife, which his story is a whole another 2-hour story that I'm not getting into. This is where he lived. Now, if you go there today, I've been there. If you go there today, that place looks the same as it did in 1963, 60 years ago. When Oswald came home, he walked right in, got out of the cab, came right in there, and here's the front door right here, and went in and went back to his room. There was a landlady there, and she said to him, Mr. Lee, come here, look at what's on the TV. Have you heard? The president's been shot. And he mumbled something to her and continued back the hallway to his room. At that time, Mrs. Roberts, the landlady, heard a beep, beep. She's in this front room right here where the curtains are. She looks out, and down here's the street. She looks out, and what does she see? A Dallas police car, number 107, stopped in front of the house, beep, beep, and sat there for a few seconds, then drove away. Mrs. Roberts was interviewed by the Dallas police, and she told them that story. So they said, okay, let's look up and see who was that in Dallas police car number 107 that would have been there at that time that this was going on. When the Dallas police went to check to see what car 107, where it was, they found out they didn't have a 107. Now, was this Oswald's getaway and he missed it? Was this a fake Dallas police car that was supposed to pick up Oswald and get him out of town? That's another theory. Oswald then comes running out of his room, runs down the hall, comes out the front door and goes down to the sidewalk and standing. Mrs. Roberts watched him. He's standing. He's looking up and down the street like this. Like he's waiting for somebody. That's why the theory is that he missed his ride out of town. Oswald then starts walking up in, like I said, Calcutta and East Liverpool. Oak Cliff is what it's called in Dallas. And he's walking up through town. By this time, back down at the Texas School Book Depository, the police are doing an inventory, trying to find out, okay, well, who's at work that day? Let's check, people are saying shots came from this building. We got to check these employees here. And the only one missing is Oswald. He's the only one who's at work that's gone now. So Dallas police put out an all-points bulletin. Be on the lookout for a white male, 5'8", 135 pounds, brown hair. He's missing from the book depository where they say the shots came that hit the president. Patrolling out in the Oak Cliff section where Oswald is now walking the streets is a Dallas police officer named Jefferson Davis Tippit, J.D. Tippit. This is his car. People were on their porches. This is a neighborhood. People saw this happen. There were witnesses to this. Tippit notices Oswald walking up on a sidewalk, and he must have told him, hey, come here, buddy, I want to talk to you. Nobody knows what was said or anything, because no one was that close. But Officer Tippit put his car in park, opened up the driver's door here, and starts walking around to the front of the car where Oswald is over here standing on the sidewalk. He's going to talk to him. When all of a sudden, Oswald pulls out a pistol. That's what he got at his rooming house when he went back. He got his pistol. And he fires 4 shots at the police officer. The officer goes down. And then Oswald goes up and takes another shot, point blank, and shoots him in the head to make sure he killed him. Then Oswald takes off, running down the street, throws his jacket off, empties the shell casings out of his pistol, and starts reloading with more bullets. He runs past a downtown area in Oak Cliff that there's some stores here. And there's shoe stores, furniture stores, candy, all kinds of stores. And Oswald, the police now sirens are blaring all over the place because, an officer has just been shot down the street. Well, every time a siren or police car is coming down the street, Oswald ducks into a storefront and acts like he's shopping, looking in the windows like he's going to buy something. Then when the police car goes by, he starts walking again. Here comes another car. A man who was running a shoe store named Johnny Brewer notices this and says, this guy's acting really strange. He's just acting weird. So Johnny Brewer comes out of his shoe store and he watches Oswald go down the street. He knows something's up because there's so many police sirens in the area. He knows something happened and this guy's acting weird. And he watches him, and Oswald ducks into a movie theater called the Texas Theater. He walks right in the front. So Johnny Brewer goes down to the Texas Theater and he says to the ticket lady, hey, did you just sell a ticket to a strange guy who just came in here? No, I didn't sell a ticket to anybody. He must have snuck in. He must have stuck behind when I was looking down or something. He must have snuck in. So the Dallas police are now called because there's something weird and this guy snuck into the theater. This is Officer Nick McDonald of the Dallas Police. He'll be one of the guys that comes to the theater. At this time, there's probably about 30 police cars that surround the Texas Theater. The police come in, they turn the movie off, they come up here on the front where the screen is, and they have Johnny Brewer, the shoe salesman, and they say, okay, which one is he? He said, that's him back there. 3rd row from the back, 3rd seat in. So the police officers then go down, start walking up the aisles. They get up to where Oswald is. He's sitting there. His gun's been reloaded. And Officer Nick McDonald right here says to him, "Come on, buddy, we want to talk to you." Oswald gets up and says, "This is it." Pulls out his pistol and tries to shoot Officer McDonald right here in the theater. Officer McDonald grabbed his hand, grabbed the gun, and when the hammer came down to discharge the bullet, it hit Officer McDonald's thumb, got in the way, and that's why the gun misfired. And by this time, he's got help, and they all subdue Oswald. Oswald's coming out. This is him. Oswald's being led out of the Texas Theater now by 2 policemen, and he is saying, "Police brutality, police brutality." There was a big, fisticuffs, fist fight in the theater between Oswald and the police. Back down at Dealey Plaza, the book depository, they find the rifle between the boxes that Oswald hid. This is the gun Oswald would have used to shoot the president. Here's the gun down at police headquarters. Oswald bought this gun for $12.95, in April, or March, I should say, March of 1963, so about 7 months before he killed the president. Here's the paper bag. They say that Oswald brought the disassembled rifle to work that day, hid it in this brown paper bag, and then when his co-workers broke for lunch, this is when he put the gun together and took it out. Here's a piece of the president's skull that they will find in the grass down in Dealey Plaza. This is the back seat of the president's limousine. They took the president to Parkland Memorial Hospital. They rushed him there. They got him there within 4 minutes. Wasn't very far. When they got there, Mrs. Kennedy, of course, had the president down in her lap, and she's cradling his head. And they wanted to take the president. "We got to get the president out and get him into the hospital, to the emergency room, see what we can do for him." She said, "No, no, 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 no. You're not moving my husband. You're not moving him. Not moving him." Because of the disfiguration of his head, his skull, with the big massive wound on the right side, she did not want anybody to see that or take pictures of that when they got to the hospital. So Clint Hill, the agent, the only one that reacted, that jumped up and pushed Mrs. Kennedy back and rode to the hospital, took his coat off and put it over the president's skull, and that's when she agreed to let him take him in. When they get into the emergency room, Mrs. Kennedy's standing there, you'll see her here in a minute, all blood-stained, everything, and she's got something in her hand. She didn't know it. She opens her hand up, and there's a piece of the president's skull that had been out on the back of the car when he was shot in the head. She gives this to the doctors and says, "Here, I don't know if this will help." This is the limousine. These are cracks in the windshield, and in the chrome were bullet fragments, were bullet splintered, and fragments of it put dents in the chrome and in the windshield. These are the bullet fragments they found in the limousine. They worked as hard as they could on Kennedy to keep up. Everybody knew, the doctors knew, but they had to do their job, that there was no hope. I mean, if it happened today, there'd be no hope. Just a massive head wound. I believe, if I remember right, I think a third of his brain was missing. Now, how are you going to put a guy back together with a third of his brain missing? But they did what they could. They brought the president in, laid him down, and they saw this bullet wound in his throat. They took his jacket off, his tie, his shirt. They took that all off there, and they saw that hole, and they knew the president needed a breathing tube called a tracheotomy. So they enlarged that hole and stuck a tube down to help the president breathe while they worked on other parts of his body. Well, they did the best they could. Pronounced the president dead at 1 o'clock Central Standard Time, which is an hour, 2 o'clock here. I actually met some people from Beaver Local at the other building who were actually sitting in their classrooms when word came on to PA at the old building that the president had been shot. And everybody was sent home because this was a big thing. The amazing thing, guys, is, I don't know how many people would be crying or upset if, Bill Clinton would have got killed or if Joe Biden gets killed today. I'm sure some people would. But the thing is, when this happened, guys, it was like the nation was shut down for 3 days. I do not remember it. The only thing I remember is the funeral that I'll get to here. I was only 6 years old. I can remember seeing the funeral procession on TV. That's all I remember. But it's the only thing that was on TV for 3 days. For 3 straight days when this broke, nothing was on television. Now back then we didn't have cable TV. We had regular channels on an antenna. Okay? But every network, and there was only 3 networks, NBC, ABC, and CBS, and this is all they showed. So everybody was engrossed in this. This is the president leaving the hospital, taking him out of the emergency room. He's been pronounced dead. There's nothing they could do. Mrs. Kennedy took off her wedding ring and put her wedding ring on his finger at the hospital before she left. And they get back to Love Field where the president, guys, he had just landed here maybe an hour and a half ago, and now he's coming back in a casket. Okay, he just walked off the plane to all these crowds, and now he's going back in a casket. Okay, this is the Secret Service and some of the president's detail that are taking the casket up. They're going to fly back to Washington, D.C., and the doctors in Dallas wanted to do an autopsy right there. They said, we need to do an autopsy. This was a homicide. Anytime it's a homicide, Texas law requires an autopsy. Secret Service would have nothing to do with it. This is not an ordinary homicide. This is the President of the United States. We're taking it back to Washington. So there's a big controversy there, too, because the autopsy was all screwed up. Mrs. Kennedy, you can see blood on her bottom and stuff on that picture, going up onto the... Vice President Johnson is going to be sworn in as the new President of the United States before they ever take off from Dallas. And there he is being administered. These are sketches of the autopsy back in Washington. They took the president. President Kennedy was in the Navy, actually won all kinds of medals being in the Navy in World War II. And this is a sketch of where the bullet entered his back and exited his throat. And when you look at the shirt and the jacket, if you notice, Oswald's in behind. Oswald's up in the 6th floor when they're shooting down at the president. So here's the hole in the back of the shirt that lines up with his jacket. Look how low that is. See how far down his back it is? And it supposedly came out his throat, and there's his tie and shirt he had on. You can see it came out there at the throat. And it did not hit any bone or anything in his body when it went in his back. So one of the big things, mystery still, is why doesn't the autopsy photographs and pictures match up with the evidence? Here's the throat wound, where they enlarged it to make the tracheotomy. Here's the back of the president's head. This isn't actually his head. This is just a drawing. These pictures would have never been released until, I believe, 1990s, late 90s is when they actually let the official pictures of that stuff out. This was too grotesque for the American people to see. Here's the shot that went in the back of his head here and came out right over here to the right side. Okay? Here's an x-ray of his skull. You can see how much damage the bullet did to shatter it. This is the front of his skull. This would have been his eye sockets right here. That's the massive wound that killed the president. If the president just would have got shot in the back and exited his throat, he would have lived that. He would have survived that, more than likely. After the autopsy, this is at 4:30 in the morning. This is Saturday morning now. They, of course, embalmed the president, and they're going to take him to the White House. Mrs. Kennedy, on the ride home on the plane from Dallas, gets together with some of Kennedy's personal assistants, and they're planning the funeral. And Mrs. Kennedy wants it to be a big, spectacular thing for the American people, to have this, their fallen hero, their great savior that, we didn't go to nuclear war with the Soviets, Kennedy did it. And all. So they're going to have this big, tremendous funeral. So she starts thinking, what can we do? Well, they start putting it together. Well, they did some history checking. They found out that Abraham Lincoln, the thing that Abraham Lincoln laid on when he was shot and killed by John Wilkes Booth clear back in 1865, was still in the National Archives. And Mrs. Kennedy said, my husband and President Lincoln were for civil rights, for equal rights between the races. Let's make a connection. Kennedy, Lincoln. So they get this bier, this black thing here, and they put it in the East Room, the same place where Lincoln was laid out. So they make a connection to Lincoln. You can see Mrs. Kennedy still has the pink suit on with the blood stains, and they're laying the president out in the East Room at the White House. Meanwhile, back in Dallas, Oswald has been arrested, Texas Theater. You can see that he's been punched in the head and in the eye. That's Nick McDonald, who grabbed Oswald first. They're booking Oswald. Oswald's telling everybody at the Dallas Police Court, I didn't shoot anyone. No, sir, I didn't shoot. I'm a patsy. They set me up. Somebody set me up for all this. I didn't do this. They find out that Oswald had a wife and has a mother that lives in Fort Worth, Texas, 20 miles from Dallas. So they call them up. Then they find out that Oswald had 2 babies. He had a newborn that was just born like 8 months before he shot the president. And they bring his wife and his mother down to the police headquarters. They find out that Mrs. Oswald had all the belongings, because they were separated, they weren't married anymore, all the belongings that they had were stored at a place in a garage where Mrs. Oswald was staying with a friend of hers, since her and Lee were separated. And Lee lived in Oak Cliff in Dallas. They found in the garage this picture of Oswald holding the rifle, pistol in a holster, and communist literature in his hand. And they asked Mrs. Oswald, did you take this picture? And she said yes. Took it back in Dallas. This is evidence that the police, there's the paper bag, there's the empty shell casings, there's Oswald's jacket that he threw off when he was running after he shot the police officer. There's the pistol he shot the police officer with. And this is the blanket that Mrs. Oswald said the gun was rolled up in. She said, yeah, Lee owns a rifle. It's in the garage out here. It's rolled up in a blanket. This is Oswald at Saturday night at the press conference. All the reporters and stuff want to get a glimpse of the accused assassin of the president and the police officer. So they bring Oswald into this press room, and they're asking him questions, and again, he's denying everything. I didn't shoot nobody. No, I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And then somebody asked him, are you a member of that Free Cuba Committee? And a guy in the back goes, it's not the Free Cuba Committee, it's the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. When people turned around and looked, it was this guy right here with black glasses on and a suit. Everybody thought he was a reporter. Well, how did he know what the true name, anyways? The next day, the police say, we're going to move the prisoner from Dallas Police Headquarters across town to the county jail. We're going to hold him there. They say it's going to happen at 10 o'clock in the morning. 10 o'clock Sunday morning, we're removing the prisoner. They're going to bring an armored car down this ramp right here. They're going to put Oswald in this armored car because there's rumors out there that somebody's going to try to shoot Oswald for killing our beloved president. And we're going to bring his car down, we're going to put Oswald in it, and then we're going to take him to the county jail. Well, 10 o'clock comes. All the newsmen are there. The police told her they're moving him at 10 o'clock in the morning. All CBS, NBC, they're all there. Got their cameras set up, their reporters ready to rock and roll. Back the armored car down. They bring Oswald down, not at 10 o'clock, not at 10:15, not at 10:30, not at 10:45, not at 11 o'clock. He finally appears at 20 minutes after 11, an hour and 20 minutes later. At this time, a Dallas nightclub owner named Jack Ruby pops out of the crowd. The same man that was in the press room the night before yelling, "It's the Fair Play for Cuba Committee," pulls a gun out and shoots Oswald point blank in the stomach here. Oswald kind of glimpses at Ruby when Ruby's coming towards him. Like people say, it's another theory, that they knew each other, that they were in this together, and that it was Ruby's job to silence Oswald so he couldn't talk and let more things out. Well, what happened? Jack Ruby, this is what's strange. He got a phone call that morning. He owned a strip club in Dallas called the Carousel Club. And he had strippers that worked for him. Well, one of the strippers who called him that morning about 10 o'clock when they were supposed to take Oswald down, and they didn't, called Jack Ruby up and said, "Mr. Ruby, I need $25. I need some cash. Can you send me some money?" So Ruby gets his clothes on, heads towards the Western Union Telegraph Office, which happens to be right across the street from the Dallas Police Headquarters. He goes in and he wires $25 to Karen Carlin, his stripper. Gets a receipt. We have the receipt. It says 11:17 a.m. Ruby says, "Well, I decided to walk up to the Dallas Police building and see what was going on." And he happened to walk up there, and these entrance ramps where the cars, armored car names come out, are guarded by police, but somehow Ruby walks right down the ramp and doesn't get stopped. Happens to get there, standing right beside a CBS newsman when Oswald comes out an hour and 20 minutes late and pulls his gun and shoots him. Coincidence? There's a lot of theories on that too, guys. Plus, there's a lot more about Jack Ruby that I don't have time. Oswald is shot. They now call for an ambulance. Oswald passes out, blacks out. He's been hit in the spleen, in one of his kidneys, and one of the arteries to, I think it was his kidney, was severed. So basically what's going to happen is Oswald's going to bleed internally and die. So 2 days after President Kennedy is shot, the accused assassin, who will never stand trial or get to tell his side of the story in court, is silenced. This is Jack Ruby after he's in custody, and they keep saying, "Jack, why'd you do it? Why'd you do it?" He said, "I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it. They killed my beloved president. That guy, he deserved. He had that smirk on his face like he was proud of what he did and everything." And he said, "No. Jack, you just screwed up, man. You screwed up." Oswald has an autopsy done on him. This is the actual picture of his. You can see where the gunshot got him. Okay, they got him right there, and that's what caused the internal bleeding. Oswald in his casket, Oswald's funeral, no funeral. This is Monday morning. His wife, estranged wife, their newborn, or their younger daughter that's 3 years old, her name is June, his brother, his mother, and a friend of the family with the newborn. They couldn't even get anybody, the funeral home, when they went to the cemetery to bury Lee Harvey Oswald in Fort Worth, Texas. They had to ask newspaper reporters to carry his casket because nobody wanted to mess my, I don't got nothing to do with that guy. So newspaper men, reporters, and you can see them standing, policemen that were there, they carried Oswald. Meanwhile, back in Washington, Saturday night when Bobby Kennedy, the president's brother, and Mrs. Kennedy, when the president's laying in state in the East Room of the White House where Lincoln laid on that thing, Robert Kennedy says, "I want to see my brother." And the morticians and them that embalmed him said, "Mr. Kennedy, you don't want to see this. I want to see my brother. I want you to open that casket right now. I want to see my brother." Nobody was around but Mrs. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. And when they opened the casket, they tried to reconstruct the president's head by filling it with wax. And it was still just so grotesque that Robert Kennedy fainted and sobbed that was his brother. He just couldn't take it. Saturday morning, or I should say Sunday morning, they're taking the president from the White House now down the street to the Capitol building where he will lay in state in the Capitol Rotunda here. You can see all the people that are lined up. Like I said, this was a national disaster. You know, I don't know if you guys were old enough when 9/11 happened or not. Were you guys born when 9/11 happened? You couldn't have been very young, I was going to say. There's certain dates in American history where people can tell you where they were, what they were doing when they heard when this happened or that happened. This was one of those times. They're going to take the president's casket up into the Capitol Rotunda, and there he will lay in state. And then all day Sunday, tens and tens of thousands of people walk past the president's casket. The funeral is going to be the next day, Monday morning. This caisson wagon that the president will be taken to the Capitol and then returned back to the church where he'll have his funeral, again connecting with history, Mrs. Kennedy, that is the same thing that President Franklin Roosevelt, when he died, was paraded through the streets of Washington on. Again, she's trying to connect John Kennedy with. Okay, this is the president's brother Robert, his other brother Ted, his brother-in-law Sergeant Shriver, his other brother-in-law Stephen Smith, of course his wife, and there's now President Johnson. They're going to walk from the White House to the church. This is the famous picture. President Kennedy had two children. Caroline, who's the only one that's alive, and John Kennedy Jr. John Kennedy, it was his birthday today. November 25th, 1963, he turned 3 years old. And instead of having, well, he'll have a birthday party later. He doesn't know what's really going on. But he's at his dad's funeral instead of having his birthday party. When the officers and all of the honor guard and that were there carrying the president's casket, little John Kennedy Jr. sees them all saluting the president's casket. Well, that's when little John Kennedy decided to salute his dad too, his farewell. They're walking to the church. You can see that guys, dignitaries from all over the world came. Presidents, kings, queens, prime ministers, all over the world came to pay their respects to John Kennedy. Okay? To him, he was the big hope for peace in the world. And now he's gone. After the funeral at the church, they take John Kennedy's casket, put it back on the wagon, and they're going to go across this bridge here, across the Potomac River, to Arlington National Cemetery. This is where he's buried. Okay? Now, the ironic thing here is, President Kennedy used to go to Arlington Cemetery across the river from Washington and visit once in a while. And one of his best friends, Robert McNamara, who was his Secretary of Defense, they were standing over, looking, when you stand over here on the hill by that big white house right there, when you stand there, you can look back and you can see Washington. You can see the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, the Capitol building in the distance. And Kennedy said, boy, this would be a great place to spend the rest of my life. And McNamara remembered that. And he told Mrs. Kennedy, I know where he wants to be buried. And that's why they picked this site. This is the bridge that just came across. They'll come up here, and then up here is where the gravesite will be. Mrs. Kennedy again wanted to make sure that it was a great occasion and that President Kennedy's light, his fire for peace would never burn out. The Kennedy family came up with the idea of having the eternal flame. Still burns today, still there. Any of you guys ever been to Arlington Cemetery? Some of you guys, have you been to Kennedy's grave? Okay. The eternal flame is still there, still burning. They lit it that day, and it's to never extinguish. This is what the gravesite looked like back a couple days after the funeral, after they buried her. Mrs. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy's brother went back there almost every day for like 2 weeks. And this is what it looked like in 1963 when they buried him. That's not what it looks like now. It's all stone slabs and stuff. Plus, Mrs. Kennedy's buried there. One of the president's children who died at childbirth is buried there with him too. And Robert Kennedy's brother is buried about 25 yards to the left. Okay. How much time do I have?
45 minutes.
Okay. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go that long. But anyways, when these new bits of information came out, these documents, I think I mentioned about the newspaper getting a phone call right before the assassination occurred in the United States and England and told them to get down to the American Embassy, something big's going to happen. Well, behind the picket fence, I don't know if I forgot to show you when I had the picture there, of the railroad tower. A man named Lee Bowers was standing up there. He was at work that day, and his job was to watch the railroad tracks to make sure trains didn't go on the same tracks and wreck into each other. And Lee Bowers testified and said that he saw 3 vehicles with out-of-state plates, one at a time, come back behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll. There's a parking lot there, and drive around past that picket fence, and then go around the park and then take off. And he said they had out-of-state plates. 5 minutes later, another car comes with out-of-state plates with 2 men in it, does the same thing as the car before, and takes off. 5 minutes later, another car comes in, goes behind the fence. This time he said, one of the guys had a walkie-talkie. One of them had a walkie-talkie. And they took off. Lee Bowers thought, boy, this is really strange. 3 out-of-state cars that have mud up to the driver's side doors come through here right before Kennedy is shot. What were they checking for? What were they looking for? And then he noticed that there were 2 men, some commotion going on down behind the picket fence when the assassination happened. And before he had a chance to tell the investigators what he saw, they cut him off. So that's all, Mr. Bowers. We don't need you to say no more. But, no, Mr. Bowers, that's it. We don't need you to say no more. Lee Bowers was going to tell him, I saw 2 men, and I saw something going on down there behind the picket fence when Kennedy was shot and killed. They wouldn't let him testify. About 6 months later, Lee Bowers bought a brand new car in Dallas. Lee Bowers had been talking about what happened to him and what he saw. Lee Bowers takes this brand new car off the lot, drives down the street, comes to the first stop sign, steps on the brakes don't work, goes through it, gets hit by a truck, killed. Coincidence? Lyndon Johnson, president, after later on in his life, was interviewed, what do you think happened to Kennedy? Johnson says, I can't really say for sure, but what the government investigation came up with is that I have to stick by them and this and that. And when he was off camera, he said to the guy interviewing him, Walter Cronkite from CBS News, I think Castro in Cuba got Kennedy before Kennedy got Castro. Kennedy was trying to have Castro assassinated for 3 years. It even went into when Lyndon Johnson was president. One of the big theories is Castro's Cubans in America that came in here shot and killed the president because the president was trying to have him killed. LBJ, Lyndon Johnson, has a letter, a document, that's to be released. You guys will get to see it, most of you. 2038. There's a letter going to be released by the National Archives. That's the one you want to look at. That's one you want to pay attention to. Because Lyndon Johnson's going to explain, this is what he said, what happened that day. One of our other former presidents, George H.W. Bush, the old man, the older man, not the one that's still alive, his dad. Everybody in America can tell you where they were, what they were doing when Kennedy was shot, when he heard the president's been shot. Not him. Oh, I don't remember where I was. Really? There are pictures, supposedly. I've seen them now. Pictures of George Bush in Dallas that day when Kennedy was shot and killed. George Bush worked for the CIA. The CIA, when we hated Cuba. Why? Because they turned communist. We can't have communism 90 miles off the coast of Key West, Florida. You can't have communism that close to America. That's evil. That's the devil. That's bad. Ooh. We can't have that. And this rotten Kennedy is trying to be friends with the communist Khrushchev in Russia and Castro in Cuba. We can't have this stuff. Another theory. It's really strange. When Kennedy was trying to kill Castro and overturn his government and put a government in there that was a democracy like us to get Cuba back the way it was, there were a lot of Cubans that escaped Cuba. They didn't want to live under Castro there. So they escaped. And they came to the United States. And we put them in refugee camps. And we trained them. We found 1,500 volunteers that were willing to fight and go back to Cuba and try to take out Castro and topple his government. Those 1,500 were trained in Guatemala and outside of New Orleans, Louisiana. And the day came when it's time to go. It's time to go. They're ready. They're ready to go. Those 1,500 men landed as what became known as the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was a total disaster. Castro knew they were coming. He knew how many they were. He knew everything about the mission because he had spies inside the United States and reported back to him. It was a slaughter. The Cubans that went in and tried to topple Castro, that were trained by the CIA, were promised, don't you guys worry, the day before you land, we're going to blast Castro's Air Force, blow him up. He won't have a plane to get off the ground because our Air Force is going to bombard them fields. And then, when you land, there's going to be U.S. Navy battleships off the shore backing you guys up. Well, that sounds like we could do it. Kennedy becomes president. That plan was put into effect before Kennedy was elected. When Kennedy heard about the plan, he called his top CIA and military guys and he says, now give me the rundown on this. Is this going to work? Oh, Mr. President, it's going to work. We've got information coming out of Cuba that these people are just ready to uprise and wreak havoc in the streets. It's going to be crazy once these guys land. And President Kennedy said to his generals and the CIA leaders, don't you think the world will think the United States is invading Cuba if we send our Air Force to blast Castro's planes the night before, and then the morning when they land, there's U.S. naval battleships? Don't you think that's going to look like the United States is trying to invade Cuba? Well, Mr. President, that's what we got to do. And Kennedy says, whoa, wait a minute. I'm just the new president here in the White House. And I don't know if I can go along with this. And so he asked the CIA and the military, now, what if we don't use the Air Force and blow their planes up? Can this still work without direct U.S. military Air Force involvement? And the CIA said, yes, Mr. President, it will still work. Now, will it work if we don't have U.S. naval ships off the coast of Florida or off the coast of Cuba looking like we're going to invade Cuba? Is it still going to work? Oh, yes, Mr. President, it's going to work. And then Kennedy said, well, as long as there's no U.S. military involvement, then go ahead and do it. So on April the 17th, 1961, these men, 1,500, land in the Bay of Pigs and they're slaughtered. 1,300 are taken to prison. Another 200 are killed right there on the beaches. They're looking up into the sky. Where's those U.S. planes? They're looking behind their backs. Where's those naval ships? Why aren't they helping us? They weren't there. And guess what? Somebody forgot to tell those 1,500 guys that, oh, by the way, the president called off the air support and the naval support. They wouldn't have done it. They hate Kennedy. They hate Kennedy. When Lee Harvey Oswald was in New Orleans, that's where he was born. He actually moved back there later when him and his wife separated for a little bit. He was seen with Cubans. When he goes to Dallas and moves, he's seen with Cubans. One night in Dallas, Texas, there's a Cuban refugee, a woman named Sylvia Odio. Her and her sister had fled Cuba with Castro taking power. Her mom and dad, her dad was like head of a bank in Cuba. He was captured and put in jail with her mother. And they were trying to get them out and trying to support these people to go back and take Cuba over. And she gets a knock at her door. She goes to the door. Are you Sylvia Odio? Yes, I am. Who are you? I'm Leopoldo, and that's Angelo, and that other guy is Leon Oswald. We want to talk to you. We are members of JUR. It was an anti-Castro group in the United States, an organization. We want you to give us some money. We need boats. We need to get into Cuba and blast, and take dynamite and blast Castro's, telephone offices and stuff. We need your help. She says, can you help? Can you help us? And she said, no, not at this time. I can't help you. 2 months later, when Oswald's on TV, is shown as the assassin, she fainted. She goes right to the police and the FBI. He was in my house, end of September 1963, with 2 Cuban guys. Mrs. Odio, you must be mistaken. See, Lee Harvey Oswald was really in Mexico City at that time. No, Lee Harvey Oswald, who was introduced to me as Leon Oswald, was in my house with these 2 Cuban revolutionaries. A revolutionary group that was formed by the CIA called Alpha 66. Cuban refugees had a whole bunch of different different refugee groups that got together and were trying to wreak havoc in Cuba to get Cuba back for them. Alpha 66 was recruited, and what their job was, they would sneak boats. They'd have these speed boats that would go into Cuba, and they would blow up water plants, water treatment plants. They'd blow up telephones so they couldn't communicate. Anything that could do damage to Castro's economy. These groups of Cuban exiles that we funded and trained went in and did that stuff. The head of Alpha 66 was a man named Antonio Veciana. His handler, his CIA handler, was a guy named David Atlee Phillips, a.k.a. Maurice Bishop. Veciana says to Bishop one day, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you about these raids. I need to talk to you about stuff. He says, meet me in Dallas. Meet me in Dallas, Texas. I'll be there. Come see me. Veciana goes to Texas, Dallas. He's walking down the street where he's supposed to meet David Atlee Phillips. Didn't call him that. He thought his name was Maurice Bishop. We found out that David Phillips was Maurice Bishop. CIA station chief of the Western Hemisphere. He's talking to this guy on the sidewalk. This is in November of 1963, near the beginning of the month. As Antonio Veciana gets closer, he doesn't want to bother him, and David Atlee Phillips says, Antonio, come here. Hey, I'd like you to meet a friend of mine, Lee Oswald. Now, what is a head of the CIA of the Western Hemisphere doing talking to Lee Oswald in Dallas, Texas, 3 weeks before the assassination? They denied it. That wasn't David Atlee Phillips. That was some idiot named Maurice Bishop. We don't even know who he is. He don't exist. You need to watch the Zapruder film when you get a chance, so you can see the actual assassinations. There were thousands of cameras and things there, but Abraham Zapruder was the only one that actually kept his camera going as the whole thing happened. You need to watch that. Now, President Johnson knew he had a problem, so he decided to get these great men in the United States Congress, along with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Earl Warren, and they created a commission. And that commission became known as the Warren Commission. And they're going to investigate. And they're going to find out what happened, if Oswald had any ties to anybody, if Ruby had ties with anybody when he shot Oswald. They're investigating this. Well, their information came from the FBI and the CIA. That's where they got their facts from. That's who investigated the crime, and that's who turned over their reports. So what the Warren Commission got in 1963, in December, into 64, was evidence that was accumulated by the FBI and the CIA. That's all they were told. Were they told that Kennedy was trying to kill Castro and trying to get him out of power? Was the Dallas police warned that there was a communist defector named Lee Harvey Oswald living in Dallas and working in that building the day Kennedy's car went by? No. This was a total intelligence failure. And the CIA had to protect their reputation, and the FBI had to protect theirs. Why didn't J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI, the head of the FBI, call the Dallas police and say, hey, we've been watching this guy named Oswald. Keep an eye out for him. Why didn't the CIA? This guy defected to the Soviet Union and supposedly gave U.S. military secrets to the Soviets. He was a former Marine here. And he comes back to the country with a Russian wife and daughter. What's going on here? They didn't tell anybody. There's so much, guys, so much. And I'm going to end with this. There's a guy from East Liverpool, believe it or not, grew up on Park Boulevard. Went to East Liverpool High School. I don't know what year he graduated. He's like 80. I want to say he's 85, 86 now. He lives in San Francisco. That Zapruder film that I'm telling you to watch, that Zapruder film. It's 26 seconds long. Life magazine bought the rights to that film. Life magazine. And Life magazine was under the condition Zapruder was going to sell it to him. Sold it for $150,000 in 1963. That's a lot of money. Sold it to them. They had exclusive rights to the film on the condition that they never show it to the American public because it's too gross. They agreed to that. They bought the film. They hired this guy that grew up in East Liverpool, who was a private investigator at this time, graduated from Harvard and Yale, smart guy. His family owned one of the potteries in East Liverpool years ago. His name's Josiah Thompson. And they hired him. They hired Josiah Thompson to look at the film and see what he thought. To come up with, they're going to print it in Life magazine, but they're not going to show the headshot sequence or anything. They're just going to show the pictures of the motorcade ad. Well, when Josiah Thompson started looking at this film and seeing, okay, Oswald's behind. Why does Kennedy's head go backwards and to the left? That doesn't make any sense in physics or anything. What happened? So he starts investigating, and what he found out was there's a lot more to this story than what people are being told. So he wrote a book in 1967 called 6 Seconds in Dallas. 6 Seconds in Dallas. That book came out. It was so controversial that he got a lot of flack from the FBI and lots of people. Oh, he's just trying to start conspiracy theories. Our government investigated, the Warren Commission did their job, and they investigated us, and we know that they're fine, upstanding men. He wrote the book. It was so controversial, they almost took it off the market. I don't know, you can go on Amazon now, I think, and get a used copy. You can't buy it now. Josiah Thompson, all these years like me, is still intrigued. He just came out with a book last year called Last Second in Dallas. He don't name names of who shooters were, but he believes there were 3 shooters from his investigation. One of them was on a building across the street from the book depository, guy on the roof, Oswald in the 6th floor of the book depository, and a shooter on the grassy knoll. There are people I've met that have actually told me the names of who the shooters were. But you can't prove it. Plus, they're all gone now. That book is, it's real technical, though. It's not something I would recommend if you're just starting, if you're interested in this or anything. 6 Seconds in Dallas will be a good book, just to give you the whole background story of what happened. But there, guys, if you want to make money, you want to make some money, come up with a theory. Goofy shot John Kennedy. He was the grassy knoll assassin. Write a book, you'll sell it, because people are still intrigued by the assassination of the president. You go up to Barnes and Nobles now, you still find books on it. Guys, in this November, it'll be 60 years. 60 years. And a lot of these mysteries still have not been answered. And if Lee Harvey Oswald did it all by himself, had nobody else, why the mystery? I don't know. We don't have time for questions.
I was just going to say, do you have time? I mean, we've got a few minutes if anybody wants to ask you.
If anybody has a question, you can ask me. Make sure you yell it because I can't hear you.
Who do you personally believe shot and killed John F. Kennedy?
I've been asked that question. I've had people ask me at the YMCA and stuff, well, who killed Kennedy? I say, well, you got 3 hours? Yeah. My original thinking was it was these Cubans, these anti-Castro Cubans that Kennedy left out to dry at the Bay of Pigs. Oswald was involved with them, and I believe originally that the CIA they didn't like plan it, but they knew about it and let these guys perform it because they thought Kennedy was selling us out to the communists, and it's better one man dies and the whole country go to HE double toothpicks. Now, I didn't even get into the mob, organized crime. There's a good chance they might have had Kennedy done away with. There's a good chance our own military generals might have had him done away with. Curtis LeMay, who you guys know. Like I said, I could stand here till 7 o'clock tonight and still not tell you everything I know. That's why I'm glad I got having some kind of guideline to go by, because there is so much. If you start looking at one tangent over here, it branches off into 60 other ones and they never come together. It's like eventually a crime comes together. It gets solved, at least most of the time. I mean, there's still some. Natalie Holloway or something. But anyways, anybody else? I didn't bore you, did I? I'm sure. Derek Wolf came to me. I had him in class. After he graduated from college, he came back, visited, and he came down to see me. He said, I just want to tell you, that 60s class you had, I told my professors at Cincinnati all about you, man. Oh, they want to come take your class. Derek, I got Derek in that class. He loved it. He's not the only one. I get phone calls all the time now. A girl I had not too long ago went to the University of Akron, called me, wants to know if I can do this, what I did today, at the University of Akron. I'm getting a little, I don't know. I get excited sometimes still, but I've been doing this for so long, it's getting old. So, anything else? Anyway. Nothing? All right. Been fun.
Hey guys, we want to thank you, again, thank Mr. Solterbeck for sharing all of his knowledge, and I want to thank all of you for being so attentive. I think this is one of our best assemblies we've had, honestly. Really appreciate it. At this time, what time